Morning, students, and Jai Hind. Uh, so far, we have now discussed about the and we have studied about the feudalism and the rise of and the condition or the status of the three states which were now which had been the very strong social system and the political and social or economic system of the Europe. Understand? Our students, and in that sequence of our study and the chain of our study, now we have studied about the feudalism, which now began first of all in the France. Understand? Or in the France, and later on in the Britain or Italian portions, or in Italy. These feudalisms now emerged or the consolidated and took a very strong system under which the entire medieval period and the medieval rules governed. Understand? And now we hear, and we have also seen that what was the state of the first state, clergy class. We have studied that the clergy now enjoy a lot of privileges. Understand? Or a lot of privileges they enjoyed, or now they had or we know that the clergy or the church system, the system was a state within a state. Understand? We have seen that there was a state within the state, or this state within the state, they functions and the work. Understand? Or quite independent from the quite independent. This system now functions the complete independent from the king's authority and the monarch's authorities. Understand? And enjoy or exercise the power in the power just as they had their own officials. The clergy had, or church system had its own judiciary system. Church had, okay. So now in this way, and church now used to raise the taxes from the common man. Understand? Now we have seen that a lot of they now exercise the power or the they had the very independent position and conditions and very much influence over the society. Understand? And deep impact they had under the society because of their religious status and the religious hold in the empire. Now, students, second state I have already mentioned about the regarding the second nobility. Nobility, you have studied about that how the feudal lords, understand, they were the now exercise the political authority within their states or within their small political unity or in their respective principalities, small principalities or the and they now accepted the subordinations of the king, and they also enjoyed a lot of a lot of privileges they had and they used to take the even the beggar, and they used to take the armed services from the common man and from the peasants. Understand? We have seen, and they had also the right to impose the taxes upon their subjects. Okay. Now here, and they ultimately they express their allegiance and the subordination to the king. Okay. Under that, one person was under the subordination of other person. So this chain, understand, began from the at the top the sitting the king, and the later we can see that in the second later we can vassal system was also. The vassal system was that the if one man's just dedicated and subordinates himself to the superior, understand, this is the vassal is. Okay. Or moreover, the one militia or the since those age in the medieval age was the age of constant conflicts for the extension of the land or positions or the extension of the territorial extension. So now this under this they had the much requirement of the maintaining the strong army to meet those the circumstances. So these farmers who were being and he used to take the used to give the service. They proved not to be the sufficient. Understand? That's why they needed these feudal lords needed a professional army or a professional and a skilled army. So that's why they now a knight system started. The knight system was much resemblance to the vassal system. Understand? The knights were also spared the large tracts of the land for maintaining their horses and the arms and ammunition. Understand? So these were the processes. These were the system that, or the third state. I have already taught you about that. The third state states that constituted of the peasantry class, peasantry and the serfs. Understand? So these and the others also came under the third state. A goldsmith, blacksmith, carpenters, artisans, other artisans came under the facets of the under the columns of the third state. The third states had to be the bear the burden of the above the first state and the second state. The third states, the maximum tax had been imposed upon them. They constituted constituted almost 90% of the population. Understand? And even then, they had to be the they had to be the pay the huge tax to the church and as well as the feudal lords, and they have to be the give away the beggars. Understand? Or the they had the manorial dues. Understand? They have to be the completed, and under that manorial dues, they used to construct the palaces and the castles of the feudal lords, and as well as they had to they were deployed in the armed services. They deployed in the castles making, castles buildings, road buildings. Understand? Or moreover, they had their children and their women had to be the prepared the thread and the prepared the clothes. Understand? And as well as their children had to be the work under the wine presses. Understand? Where for the mint for the feudal lords. Understand? So they render a lots of services during that feudalism. Understand? Or their condition was not their condition. Or moreover, the slaves and the serfs. Serfs were completely under the control. Even their social norms and they were under the complete under the control of their masters, and they could not move anywhere without the prior permissions from their masters. Understand? Moreover, the serfs had to work on the field of the estates of their lords and on their masters, and they had been given away a very little part of that for the subsistence level only the spared to them. So in this way, we see that now entire system of the Europe in medieval Europe, these characteristics were there. So now, students, we shall now come towards the topic today is the feudalism in England in 11th century, crossing the British Channel. Understand? So now we shall see that the feudalism in England, when or how the feudalism or this system emerged in the Europe. Understand that this feudalism system, first of all, feudalism developed in England from the 11th century. Very clear. Second thing is that Angles and Saxons, two communities, Saxon from the central Europe. They belong to the central Angles community. You can say the tribal community, and the Saxons. They crossed from the central Europe. Understand? And had settled in England in the 6th century. If you go before the 11th century, in the 6th century, the two community from the central Europe from the France. Understand? From the France, Germany, or adjacent area, the two community in the 6th century, they crossed the British Channel. Understand? And settled down in the England. Okay? They settled down in the Angles upon the after their names. Angles after their names we called the at the England. Understand? The England is called later on. This Angles became the very strong community. Understand? Or this community dominated in the today, even today, in the British politics or the in the British community. So these Angles and Saxons in 6th century, understand, they crossed the British Channel and they settled down there. Well, or the in the that Angles, the country's name England is the variant of the now England. And that is why the England began to be the called earlier as a Angle land. Then after it was later on began to be the known as the England. Understand? And moreover, William, or in 11th century, another incident, a big incident. From there, the feudalism and the feudal system began. Now the William, the Duke of Normandy, France, then Duke of Normandy. Now he crossed the again the British Channel along with his some of the men and his assistants. Understand? He crossed the British Channel, English, and with an army, or defeated the Saxon king. The Saxon king in England, who had now already migrated in 6th century, they were ruling over the England. Understand? Or this William now crossed it, and after the crossing, he defeated the Saxon king and England, and from this time, France and England were often and Saxon and captured the England. Understand? I captured the England from the Saxons community. Okay, so this community, Saxons or the Duke, William Duke, understand? He controlled and the capture and defeated the Saxon and established his own rule there. Understand? Or from that, from there, and by from the this day, and since then, you can say since then, and from time to time, since then this time, understand, from this time, England and France were often at war because of the disputes over the trade and territory. Now, one thing is, you always keep your mind that right from the 11th century, after the capitulation of the Duke, understand, to the parts of the England and between the Saxons, understand, then England and France had been always at war. There was, although since the Duke belonged to the France, and since they now involved a century long conflict. If you see the history of the history of England and the France, international history of England and France, the history the England and France had been a bitter enemy. Understand? And they had so many issues. They were at the conflict because of the differences or the disputes over the international issues. Understand? And for the trade and for the due to the expansion of the territories, these two communities great countries now involved in the war, always in the war. For example, simple example I am giving you, students. Now here we know that first of all in India, understand, Portuguese, European, amongst the European, who came in India? First Portuguese came in India. Understand? Or the 1600 AD, the British came. Then after the Dutch came, 1602. And then after the French came in India in the 1664. Understand? In this way, this European power came in our country. So the the England and the France, they were at the war in India also. Whenever the in England or in Europe, the England and France involved in the battle, international battle. Understand? Then within in India, the East India Company and the French East India Company both involved in the war, and they now in our country they fought the Four Carnatics War. and ultimately for their dominations over the India, for the constitution of their power in India. And ultimately we see that ultimately what happened. Ultimately we find that ultimately the British now got the success to establish success their power and or establishments over the India. Understand? So now students, the or in Egypt, now so many issues they had for the over the Egypt, the Englands and the France were the had a bitter context. Understand? Over the Egypt, France wanted the Egypt to be the under its hand. Britain wanted used to be the wanted the Egypt should be the under the, because the Suez Canal. Understand? First was under the control of the France, but it was the forcibly given to the England. And this Suez canals that adjoin the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. Understand? So this Suez Canal, over the Suez Canal, these two countries had a constraint, and ultimately, and the British now consider the Suez Canal as the fate line of the British Empire in India. It was a fate line supposed to be there, and that reduced the thousands of the miles of the distance over seas. I mean, so that is the another thing. Students, let's come here. Now here in these two countries had been the always over the battle and in the battle for the territorial expansion, or as well as for their trade over the trade. So right from 11th century, I am going to tell you, until the 20th century, you can say these two countries now involved in the battle. And ultimately it was the year of the 1902. These two countries now come into the alliance that is called the triple dual intent. Understand? These two countries come closer despite say having their international differences. They resolved and came closer and closer. Why? Because of the international circumstances in which the Germany was now creating a lot of trouble to these Europeans, imperialistic Europeans. Because of their international compulsion, these two rivals country right from the 11th century, understand, now till the 20th century beginning, these two come closer and closer and fought the World War First together. Understand, student? So now this is the international circumstances. Let's come to the William first. Now he crossed the British Channel, and now where he dictated the sanction and had a land map. First of all, William went there. He got mapped. Understand? Entire territories. Okay, or the map, the distributed. Or then after what he did, he distributed it in a section of 180 Norman novels. Norman. He belonged to the Norman Norman group and the community. So now he divided the entire land, mapped the land, and then after distributed amongst the 180 novels. Understand? The lords became the chief tenants, and these lords became the chief tenants, and cultivator, means the cultivator of the king, and they became the main cultivator of these kings. And moreover, or the now king, and we are expected to give him the military help, or this they became these nobles became the cultivator, and they expected to help the king and to provide the king the military help. Understand? This was the expected, and moreover, they were obliged to supply a certain number of knights to the king, and as well as where they raised the income and the taxes from their allotted lands and from that produced, and they had to supply, they had to now supply a certain number of knights, those the very efficient or the professionals armed man, professionals armed leader. So they had to be the supply the knights to the king, understand, for the battle, for the battle purpose, for the normal scheme. Moreover, they soon began to gift some their own lands to the knights, and now for preparing the knights, understand, so they begin to uh, give away the lands, understand, assign the land to their knights, understand. So now through that produce of those lands, understand, that land the knights begin to maintain his armed or his army, and the knights we soon gift and the lands knights who would serve them just as they turn the serve the king, and knights begin to serve their lords as the lords serve the kings. So these knights whenever required they serve the kings also and serve their lords also. These knights were the professionals armed men who had been the assigned or the given away the lands for the maintenance, for the armed maintenance. Moreover, they could not, however, use their knights for the private warfare, and this was the prohibited by the king, that the lords could not use these their knights for their private purposes, for their privacy, for their private interest, which was forbidden in England. These knights could not be the used by the lords, understand, for their private use, for their personal use, understand, for their own use, for the their own interest. This was the strictly prohibited in the England. Did you understand the what the feudal structure the England in England began, or Anglo-Saxons peasants became the tenants of various levels of the landholders, or Anglo-Saxons, understand, peasants, already Saxons peasants were there, so they became the tenants of the various levels of the landholders. These 180 landholders were there, understand. So these Saxons or the Anglo-Saxons peasants who were already established in England, understand, they became their tenants at the various level. So this was the feudal structure which had been the established after the coming of William I from Normandy, crossing the British Channel, and then after he set up the feudal system in England. It may be the very clear to you, my dear students, and moreover we have further understand we have factors affecting the social or economic relation. Now here we see that social and economic relation. Okay, the social status or economic status. So what was the relation between that? We know that a member of first two orders, clergy, and the second order, the nobility, saw the social system as stable or unchanging. The nobles and the clergy, okay, never wanted to bring about the social changes in the England or any feudal system. Never. Why? The students of sociology can reply this. Why they were now interested in retaining this system, not to be the bring about any change? Why these two class? Because these two class having the benefit from this social order and the social system. That is why they were not in favor of to change any change in this system. They wanted the stability of the system because they were advantage. They had the advantage and beneficiary class, and there were several processes which were transforming the system. And although there were several processes were going on in this process, many several processes going on, understand, that were tending to transforming this system. Many changes were going, uh, about to tending towards that. Thus, and the sum of these, such as the changes in the environment. One thing is that the environment, it was a big question. As the changes in the environment was happening in England, were gradual and almost the imperceptible. This environment was the gradual and the almost the imperceptible, is not visible. The environment was changing, and that is, we know that the environment had the very deep impact on the social and the political and the economic life of the people. You know very well, the environment cast the a very changing impact upon the society, upon the politics, or upon the economy. The nights here the in England the environmental changing was happening, and others were more dramatic, like the changes in agriculture technology, and as well as in England agricultural technology began to be the changes, and as well as and the land use, understand, use of the land, this was also a kind of the technology of the system. So these changes were happening, and these in turn were shaped by had an effect of the social and economic ties, and these in turn were shaped by your and had an effect on the social and economic ties. Social and economic ties had the effect between the lords and vassals. This changes now cast the impact upon the relations between the lord and vassals. Okay, and moreover, let's say examine the process one by one. So let's say in the further topics we shall study how these changes, process of the changes now brought about and the affixed or the affected the relations between the lords and the vassals, and between the lords and the peasants and the cultivators. How these cast the impact? First of all, let's see, students, the environment. First, the environment, we know that environment had its deep impact on the any social, economic, and political. On the politics or the economy, environment cast the deep impact or affects the relations of these different institutions also. Understand? So here we will see that, or one thing is that during those years in medieval time, environmental, a climatical change was happening very rapidly. Understand? So because of that, the agriculture or agricultural relations, okay, and the technological changes, or the and according to those, the use of the land, understand, begin according to the environment or according to the climate. So the climatical change cast the impact upon the production system, cast the impact upon the social system or the political system, even on the political system. So now we shall see that how these environment cast the, or 5th to the 10th century, between the 5th to the 10th century in England, most of Europeans was covered with a vast forest. If you see the geography of the most of the Europe, it was the cast with the forest land, covered with the forest. Thus, land available for agriculture was limited, because most of the part of the territories where the forests were there. So that's why it was natural that the arable lands were very limited. Agricultural land was very, because most of the part of the territories were covered with the forest, dense forest. The only certain parts were now the field was to be the cultivated for the agriculture. Thus, the land available for agriculture was also peasants dissatisfied with their conditions could flee from the operations to take the refuge in forest, and forest was the good shelter and for the for the cultivators and for the poor peasants. Whenever poor peasants were dissatisfied, they were oppressed by the landlords, by the zamindars. Understand? So these peasants used to take the shelter in the forest. Now, in our history is replete with such condition, such incidents. Now, whenever the oppressors they try to torture peasants, they try to raise the much revenue from the peasants, and peasants found them unable to pay that. Whatever they used to take the shelters in the and used to take the refuge in the forest, escaping the atrocities of the officials or the atrocities of the king or even atrocities of the invaders. Understand? So these forests were the good place for the hiding these escaping farmers. Understand? So now here this for even in England. Understand? Since the it was the covered, most of the part was covered with the forest. Understand? So such kind of the happenings happened, and Europe was undergoing an intensely cold climate spell in this period, or during this period from 5 to 11 10th. England was passing through a very deep passing through a intensely cold climate. A spell in this cold climate. England was passing through the cold climate, and moreover, this led to the severe and the prolonged winters. Because of that, this led a severe and prolonged, a chilly a winter and chilly, and a shortened growing season for the crops. Most of the seasons where there was a chilly, cold there. Understand? Or because of that, only a certain part of the year. Understand? A certain growing season for the crops remained, and reduced the yield from the agriculture, and that reduced the yieldings of the agriculture because of the cold zones. Understand? So the agriculture could not be the possible, not be the possible. Because of that, only a few months were suitable for the cultivation agriculture. That it's had the long cold season now cast the impact upon the yieldings, high yieldings of the agriculture. So the production became very little, and the production dwindle because of that. Okay, students. Today that is okay. The next class we shall again describe that. Okay, thank you.